There comes a moment in life when everything feels like it's pulling at your peace. The noise of the world, the expectations of people, and the pressure to react. But I came to tell somebody tonight that God is calling you higher. Not to fight every battle, not to respond to every critic, but to rest in the stillness of his presence. You don't have to prove who you are when you know who you are. When chaos comes knocking, your calm is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the evidence that you've been walking with God long enough to know he fights battles differently. See, the enemy doesn't always come through crisis. Sometimes he comes through distraction. He knows if he can't destroy you, he'll try to disturb you. But what happens when you stop giving him access to your emotions? What happens when you stop defending your name and start protecting your peace? Baby, that's when you shift. That's when you start operating from a place of divine authority, knowing that you're not responsible for every storm, only for staying anchored through it. So tonight we're talking about how to stay calm and unbothered no matter what. Not because we mastered life, but because we've learned to surrender it. I'm talking about the kind of calm that confuses the enemy. The kind of unbothered that isn't prideful but powerful. Because when your spirit is anchored in purpose, your heart doesn't panic under pressure. Let them talk. Let the storm rage. You were not built to break. You were built to stand. Protecting your peace is one of the most powerful, most spiritual acts you can commit to in a world that constantly tries to pull you in every direction. We live in a culture that teaches us to protect our reputation, defend our image, and constantly prove ourselves. But the truth is, ego's loud, peace is quiet. Ego says they need to know who I am. Peace says God already knows who I am. And the difference between those two postures will determine how you walk through life. You can either chase validation or you can rest in identity. You can either respond to every attack or you can choose the higher road and protect the atmosphere God is creating in your life. The choice is yours, and it's one that has to be made intentionally, daily. Ego thrives off of recognition. It wants the last word. It wants the applause. It wants to win. But peace is content with stillness. Peace is rooted in a deeper understanding that not everything requires your energy, that not every comment needs a clap back, that sometimes silence is not you losing, it's you preserving your soul. It's you understanding that your peace is too expensive to trade for someone else's opinion. The ego will try to convince you that you're being weak if you don't fight, but it takes far more strength to be still in the middle of chaos than it does to react in your flesh. And there's a kind of strength that only comes when you stop moving from ego and start moving from peace. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not say anything at all, not explain, not defend, not retaliate. Just let your peace speak. Because when your spirit is calm, it sends a message louder than any words ever could. I don't need to fight this. God's got it. There's a certain level of spiritual maturity that you step into when you stop fighting battles that were never assigned to you. When you realize that peace is not passive, it's powerful. Peace is the result of someone who has learned to trust God more than they trust their emotions. It's the outcome of a life that's been surrendered to something bigger than opinions, likes, and applause. You cannot protect your peace and protect your ego at the same time. One of them has to die so the other can live. And if you're not careful, your ego will sabotage everything God is trying to do in your life. It will have you walking into rooms with your guard up instead of your heart open. It will have you assuming people are against you before they even speak to you. It will have you operating from fear, not faith. And faith cannot thrive in an atmosphere where ego is in control. When peace leads, you move differently. You don't react to every trigger. You don't carry the weight of needing to be understood. You walk in the quiet confidence that what God is building in you doesn't need to be broadcast to be real. So many of us are tired, not because we're doing too much, but because we're carrying too much that doesn't belong to us. The need to be right, the need to be seen, the need to be validated. But peace invites you to lay it all down, to release the weight of having to explain your process to people who were never meant to understand it, to stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you, to stop showing up to battles that are beneath your calling. And when you finally let that go, when you finally stop letting ego drive your decisions, peace enters the room. And when peace is in the room, clarity follows, discernment follows, wisdom follows. There is something sacred about being unbothered. Not because you're detached or don't care, but because you've come to a place where you know that your energy is sacred, your emotions are sacred, your time is sacred, and you refuse to spend it on things that don't align with your assignment. That's what protecting your peace looks like, saying no to what looks good but isn't God. Saying no to distractions dressed up as opportunity. Saying no to people who don't honor your boundaries. And yes to stillness. Yes to breathing room. Yes to the quiet where you can actually hear God's voice again. Sometimes we can't hear God clearly because we've allowed our ego to raise the volume of everything else in our lives, the volume of offense, the volume of pride, the volume of insecurity. But when you quiet your ego, peace becomes louder. You start hearing things differently. You start seeing people differently. You stop being reactive and start being responsive. You stop being controlled by emotions and start being led by wisdom. And that shift doesn't just happen overnight, it's a discipline. It's choosing peace on the days you want to prove a point. It's choosing peace when you're misunderstood. It's choosing peace when silence feels like defeat. And don't get it twisted. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you avoid conflict or never speak up. It means you're strategic about what deserves your voice. You've learned that some battles are a setup, not from God, but from the enemy, trying to bait you into behavior that doesn't match your identity. Ego takes the bait. Peace doesn't even show up to the trap because peace knows that some storms are designed to distract you from your purpose. Peace knows that time spent fighting small battles is time stolen from your big calling. And if the enemy can keep you offended, he can keep you off track. There's a version of you that exists beyond the noise, beyond the opinions, beyond the comparison. That version is rooted. That version is whole. That version has nothing to prove and everything to protect. And the number one thing it protects is peace. Because when you lose your peace, you start making decisions from pain, from pressure, from panic. And that's when we start settling. That's when we start shrinking. That's when we start saying yes to things that drain us and no to the things that require faith. But peace brings you back into alignment. It reminds you that you are not what you go through. You are not what they say. You are not what you feel in the moment. You are who God says you are. And that identity is unshaken by circumstance. Protecting your peace requires discernment. It means checking yourself before reacting. It means asking, is this about truth or is this about ego? It means knowing when to walk away and when to stay quiet. It means letting God be your defender instead of defending yourself. And yes, that can feel like surrender, because it is. But it's not surrender to people, it's surrender to peace. It's surrender to a higher way of living, a way that says, I choose to be free, I choose to be whole, I choose to move differently. And when you make that choice, you give God permission to elevate you in ways your ego never could. Silence is not weakness, it's not retreat, it's not surrender in the way the world defines surrender. Silence, when led by discernment and peace, is strategy. It's spiritual warfare without noise. It's refusing to let the enemy drag you into a conversation you were never meant to be a part of. It's knowing that sometimes the most powerful move is not movement at all. In a world obsessed with clapping back, calling out, and being loud to be heard, silence becomes a language only the mature can speak. Silence is for those who understand that timing is everything and that speaking out of season can cancel what God is doing behind the scenes. We often feel the urge to respond immediately, to explain, to correct, to defend. The flesh wants to speak before the spirit has a chance to settle us, but there is something sacred about pausing, something strategic about holding your tongue, not because you're scared, but because you're wise. Silence gives space for clarity. It invites the Holy Spirit into the situation. It allows God to be the author of your response rather than your emotion. When you speak too quickly, you often say things you can't take back. But when you hold your peace, you're not just avoiding drama. You're building something stronger in the unseen. You're choosing wisdom over impulse. There's a difference between silence rooted in fear and silence rooted in strength. Fearful silence avoids confrontation. Strategic silence chooses timing. It knows that the truth doesn't need to fight to be heard. It just needs the right moment to be revealed. When you operate from spiritual maturity, you understand that God does his best work in silence. Miracles are prepared in silence. And often the noise we want to make would only distract us from the work God is doing beneath the surface. So we learn to quiet the ego, to quiet the panic, to quiet the need for validation, and to trust that silence isn't inactivity, it's divine intention. The enemy wants you to believe that if you're not saying something, you're losing, that silence means defeat. But that's because he doesn't understand the authority of stillness. Stillness is what allowed Jesus to sleep during the storm. Stillness is what allowed him to stay silent in front of Pilate. Stillness is not the absence of power, it's the evidence of it. When you know who you are, you don't have to prove it every time you're challenged. When you know God is your defender, you stop defending yourself with words. Some of your greatest breakthroughs won't come from what you say, they'll come from what you refuse to say. Because every time you resist the urge to speak prematurely, you're choosing alignment over anxiety. Sometimes silence is the only way to keep the enemy from mapping your next move. He's not omniscient. He watches your reactions. He listens to your words. He studies your responses. So when you stop broadcasting your every emotion, your every disappointment, your every plan, you confuse him. He doesn't know whether you're hurting or healed, planning or pausing. And that's the power of silence. It preserves the mystery of what God is doing in you. It protects the sacred process. It allows heaven to move while hell is left guessing. There is divine safety in silence, not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting what's holy. When you're building something significant, healing from something heavy, recovering your purpose, or stepping into a new level of faith, silence becomes your shield. You stop giving access to people who can't handle the weight of your process. You stop explaining yourself to those who only want a piece of your story, not the responsibility of your journey. Silence doesn't mean you're isolating yourself. It means you're insulating your spirit, creating space to think, to breathe, to pray, to realign, because too many voices in your ear can drown out the only voice that matters. And if you're not careful, you'll speak too soon and sabotage something God is still setting up. There's a reason Jesus often withdrew to quiet places. He understood that clarity lives in stillness, that before every major move in his ministry, there needed to be silence. Before the cross, silence. Before the resurrection, silence. There is a rhythm to God's strategy, and we have to learn to walk in step with it. Not rushing to be heard, not desperate to be seen, but confident enough to let silence do the heavy lifting, because sometimes what you don't say speaks louder than anything you could ever declare. It tells the world, I'm not led by pressure, I'm led by purpose. Your silence is a form of spiritual warfare. It's a way of saying, I trust God more than I trust my emotions. It's laying down the need to have the last word and picking up the strength to wait for God's word. It's not about being passive, it's about being patient. It's about understanding that some answers come in whispers. Some breakthroughs are birthed in stillness. And some deliverance happens when you choose not to argue, not to explain, not to fight, but to let your fruit speak for itself. Because fruit doesn't make noise, it just grows. And when your life starts producing peace, healing, growth, and joy, it will silence everything that tried to discredit you. Silence also teaches you to listen, not just to others, but to yourself and to God. When you're not always talking, you learn what's really going on inside of you. You hear the anxious thoughts. You recognize the insecurities. You catch the lies the enemy has been whispering. And then you confront them, not in public battles, but in private prayers. That's strategy. That's how you fight without fighting. You go into the secret place and let God speak into the very places the world keeps pressing on. You let him show you who you are so you don't have to prove it to anybody else. We live in a time where silence is misunderstood. People think if you don't respond, you're weak. If you don't post, you're irrelevant. If you don't argue, you don't care. But God is raising a generation of people who are willing to walk in quiet strength, who are willing to go through private refinement so they can carry public power, who don't need the spotlight because they're already lit with the fire of purpose on the inside. Silence becomes a weapon in their hands, not to wound others, but to war against everything trying to distract them. Because when your focus is protected, your future is preserved. Every time you resist the urge to react emotionally, you grow spiritually. Every time you choose silence over shouting, you train your soul to trust. And every time you let God speak for you, he shows up in ways that your words never could. There's something deeply powerful about choosing silence as a strategy. It tells the world, the enemy, and even your own flesh that your identity is no longer up for debate. It is settled, it is sealed, and it doesn't need noise to be real. Responding from purpose instead of pressure is a discipline that transforms how you navigate every situation in life. Pressure comes fast, loud, and emotional. It demands a reaction. It wants you to say something now, decide something now, feel something now. But purpose is patient. Purpose waits. Purpose asks questions. It doesn't move to satisfy the moment, it moves to fulfill the mission. And until you've trained yourself to pause in pressure and ask, is this reaction rooted in my calling or in my insecurity? You'll continue to make temporary decisions that cost you long-term peace. Responding from purpose isn't about doing less, it's about doing the right things for the right reasons. When pressure leads, chaos follows. It has you rushing into conversations you weren't ready for, committing to things that don't align with your vision, and reacting in ways that don't reflect your identity. Pressure often disguises itself as urgency. It tells you if you don't say it now, you'll miss your chance. If you don't defend yourself now, you'll lose your respect. But responding from purpose gives you permission to slow down. It reminds you that what's truly for you cannot be taken by urgency. That you don't have to rush when God has already gone before you. Pressure will have you building fast. Purpose will have you building strong. Living and responding from purpose means you don't show up to every argument, every opportunity, or every open door. Not because you're scared, but because you're strategic. Purpose has boundaries. Purpose has standards. Purpose knows that not every open door was designed for your feet. Some are distractions dressed up as elevation. Some are tests designed to see if you'll settle for visibility over value. When you move from pressure, you say yes to impress. When you move from purpose, you say yes to align. And alignment will always take you further than approval. People will pressure you to become who they need you to be for them. But purpose holds you accountable to who God called you to be for Him. Pressure will push you to perform, to pretend, to fit in. Purpose will invite you to be authentic, even if that means you're misunderstood. Because purpose doesn't serve your ego, it serves your destiny. And your destiny doesn't need everyone to understand it. It just needs you to walk in it. That's why responding from purpose requires courage. The courage to say no when pressure says yes. The courage to pause when pressure says now. The courage to walk away when pressure says, prove your worth. Pressure is manipulative. It thrives in environments where people are disconnected from their identity. When you don't know who you are, you become a puppet to pressure. You say what they want you to say, do what they expect you to do, post what they want you to post. But once you're rooted in purpose, you become unshakable. People's opinions don't hold the same weight. Their timelines don't dictate your movement. Their reactions don't determine your value. You become anchored in something that pressure can't touch, calling. And when you are led by calling, your responses carry conviction, not desperation. There's a difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is often emotional, it's triggered, it's fast. But response is thoughtful, it's rooted, it comes from a place of clarity, and clarity comes from purpose. When you respond from purpose, you filter everything through the lens of destiny. Does this move me closer to what God said, or is this just noise trying to distract me from it? That one question alone can save you from years of detours and dead ends. Purpose reminds you that not everything is worth your energy. That some situations are better left alone, that some battles are won by walking away, not clapping back. Purpose protects your integrity. Pressure tempts you to compromise it. Pressure says, say it even if it's not true. Do it even if it's not you. Take it even if you're not ready. But purpose says, wait on God, move with grace, stay in position. There's a peace that comes when you know your next move isn't being dictated by fear or frustration, but by the Spirit of God. That peace is priceless, because when you move from pressure, you always wonder if you made the right choice. But when you move from purpose, you move with peace, even if it's hard, even if it's unpopular, even if it's slow. Responding from purpose requires self-awareness. You have to know your triggers, your wounds, your patterns. Because if you're not aware of what's broken, pressure will always find a way to exploit it. Pressure preys on your impatience. Purpose develops your patience. And patience is where wisdom lives. When you respond from purpose, you're no longer trying to escape discomfort. You're allowing discomfort to grow you. You're not avoiding pressure, you're mastering it. You're not afraid of being misunderstood. You're focused on being obedient. Sometimes the most purposeful response is to not respond at all, to stay silent when they want you to react, to stay focused when they want you distracted, to stay gracious when they expect you to retaliate. Because purpose doesn't compete. It doesn't perform. It doesn't panic. It walks in quiet confidence, knowing that what's meant for you will find you, as long as you keep showing up in a line. Pressure wants you to act from fear. Purpose invites you to act from faith. And that's the difference between being led and being pushed. One is grounded, the other is frantic. When you respond from purpose, you build consistency in your character. People start to know what to expect from you, not because you're predictable, but because you're principled. You're no longer up one day and down the next. You're no longer easily swayed by opinions or trends. You become a steady place in a shaking world. That doesn't mean you don't feel pressure. It means you don't follow it. You feel it, you acknowledge it, but then you choose to respond in a way that reflects where you're going, not just how you feel, because your feelings are temporary, but your future is worth protecting. Purpose isn't always loud. It's not always celebrated. Sometimes it looks like discipline in the dark. Sometimes it looks like walking away when everyone else is running toward the spotlight. Sometimes it looks like turning down good things so you can stay in position for God things. But when you train yourself to respond from that place, you stop living for applause and start living for assignment. You stop letting external pressure dictate your internal peace. And that's when the shift happens, not just around you, but inside you. You become someone who doesn't just survive pressure, but transforms through it. You become someone who knows when to speak, when to wait, when to move, and when to be still. You become someone who leads from purpose, not from pressure. I don't know what storm you've been standing in. I don't know what pressure has been trying to make you break, but what I do know is this: you don't have to lose yourself just to survive it. You don't have to match the chaos to prove you're strong. You can be calm, you can be still, you can be unbothered, not because life isn't heavy, but because your peace isn't fragile. Your calm is not a lack of passion, it's proof of spiritual maturity. It's the evidence that you've learned how to sit in the fire and still trust the one who controls the flames. This is your moment to decide. No more being tossed by every opinion, every conflict, every fear. You're stepping into a new version of you, a grounded version, a focused version, a version that knows how to guard peace like it's gold. You don't owe the world a reaction. You owe your purpose a response. You owe your future, your discipline. Let them talk. Let it shake. You've got a peace that passes understanding, and it's not up for negotiation. This is the season where your silence will speak volumes, where your stillness will carry strength, and your joy will be your warfare. So walk out of this place knowing who you are and whose you are. Walk like your peace is protected by heaven. Walk like the storm already lost. Walk like God has already made a way, because he has. And while the world is spinning wild, you'll be right there, calm, unbothered, and completely anchored in the one who never fails. Because when God is your center, nothing can shake your soul. And that, my friend, is where your power lives.